so happy to have on David of Bombas, the CEO. Of course, a lot of people know you from Shark Tank. You look a lot different. Um, you obviously run a huge company, Bombas. You guys do so much good as well, which we'll get to later on in the interview. But I always like to start. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It was a bit of a crazy week, right? Big election. I think we're all kind of managing through, what the implications are going to be from a business perspective, social perspective. So, I've got a lot of employees. People feel differently on both sides. So, managing that's tough, but it's just another day, right?
Yep. So take me through a little bit. For you and I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs, and I absolutely love it because I've interviewed politicians too, but typically the entrepreneurs are a little bit more creative and smarter, in my opinion. But
I
um,
hope I live up to that expectation.
what is something, where did you kind of get drive and passion? I always like to start with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think probably a combination of both nature and nurture. My dad was an entrepreneur, and I watched him start a business in the basement of our house. Then he moved it to the garage, and then he moved it to an office. And you know, all the while, I was a little kid and growing up watching this happen. And I think either combination of personal intrigue and seeing, firsthand my dad build something from scratch, and watching how, our life would change, right? And all of a sudden we were adding on an addition to the house or getting a new car. And, it's like, oh, that's fascinating. Like all from this thing that he's like creating. And he had me involved in, helping to create some samples for the business for a trade show. And, so I was close to it. And then I also think probably, genetically, combination of my dad's, I think, entrepreneurial spirit, and my mom was really smart at, finance and business. I think being in a household that was very pro entrepreneurship, pro business, I think is probably what gave me my initial drive.
Fair point. And for you, of course, when you started Bombas, a big mission was you had walked in, like you said, in Shark Tank, and you realized that socks were one of the biggest products that people did not have access to. So obviously, you've grown the company to where it's at today, over $1 billion in sales. I think last year it's at 1.3 billion. I'm sure you're going above
Yep.
this year. So it's $1 billion brand. How has that been able to help you to make an impact? Obviously, it's no secret that since Shark Tank and going forward, you've are able to give away so many pairs of socks to homeless people, but
Yeah.
that impact make you feel?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm speaking honestly, like I went to school for entrepreneurship. I always kind of knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't like a social justice warrior, from a young age. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do a business that's going to have some profound, give back, impact mission. But I think like an entrepreneur, whenever a problem crossed my desk, as it were, my proverbial desk, I always looked at that problem and asked myself, hey, is there a way that I could solve this problem or help solve this problem through the lens of business? And so when I came across this quote that said socks are the most requested clothing item in homeless shelters, my brain immediately went to like, wow, that's sad. How can I help fix this problem? And, I was obviously inspired by brands like Tom Shoes and their buy one, give one model. And they were doing really well. So I was like, maybe I can create a small little sock company that donates a pair of socks to the homeless community for every pair of socks that we sell. And maybe I can have some small impact, never thinking it would be what it is today. And fast forward 11 years, and we've donated over 150 million items of clothing to those in need. On an annual run rate right now, we're doing about 30 million items of clothing every single year, and growing. And we have a network of over 4,000 shelter partners that we have individual relationships with across all 50 states. And, when I speak to them and I hear about the local impact on, what it means for them as a shelter, but also how they tell me that from the money that they've saved on not having to buy their own socks, they were able to send two kids from their community to college, or they were able to put some of their members in housing. That's where I'm like, wow, that's impact, right? Like we are originally we're like, oh, we're going to give someone a pair of socks that maybe needs them. It's probably not going to change their life. Maybe it's going to give them a little bit of comfort, a little bit of warmth, or a little bit of care and dignity in an otherwise challenging situation. And maybe it just helps them get through the day. But when you multiply that by 150 million items and you think about what that has saved all of these organizations who typically had to go out and buy these products themselves, you think about it, it's basically the equivalent of almost probably $300 to $500 million worth of, product donations, from a cost savings perspective that we've been able to give back to the community that they have been able to take those funds and redirect them into other ways that are actually impacting lives of people.
which is huge. So it's a big thing that you mentioned that, of course. Um, and I'm 19. I'll be 20 soon. A lot of people listen to my show are in the age range, I would say, of 16 to 26, obviously older people as well. So, what would kind of your advice be for younger people on why it's important to take risk in life early on?
Yeah. I mean, the qualifier there is early on, right? As you get older, life gets more complicated, right? You might have people who are dependent on you. Maybe that's a spouse or a partner. Maybe that's children. Maybe that's a relative, an aging parent. When you're young and, you don't have really anybody else to worry about but yourself, it's really easy to take risks. I mean, when I decided to start Bombas, I had saved up, I think, $50,000 in my bank account from, the time that I had graduated to, the time that I was around 30. And I was like, you know what? If I blow this $30,000, $50,000 and I lose it all, I don't, so maybe I need to move back, move to a smaller apartment, or during that period of time, I was like, maybe instead of going out and having drinks with my friends, I'm going to stay in and not go out and save that money. If I had a spouse or children, right, like it's hard to tell your family, oh, we have to move to a smaller place because I messed up, or can't buy that food that the child likes this month or whatever. Like those are much harder when it's just you. Like the classic, like you can eat ramen every night, the dollar ramen every night if you need to save money, and you're the only one who's like quote unquote suffering, but you're suffering for your dream. So I think it's good to take risk early on. That being said, I'll caveat it by saying don't underestimate the amount of value and learning that you can get on someone else's quote unquote dime. So I think one of the things that I did when I graduated, I went to school for entrepreneurship and I graduated, and I said, I'm only going to, knowing that I wanted to start companies, I said, I'm only going to go work at startups. I want to work at companies and see how a startup runs and see what are the good things, what are the challenging things, what are the things that I can learn from other entrepreneurs who are going through this journey, so that if and when I'm ready to start my own company, I'm like, oh, I remember that. That seems familiar. We made that mistake there. I'm not going to make that mistake again. And try to, get as much knowledge going into my experience. I think a lot of people because of shows like Shark Tank, or, they see all the growth that tech billionaires have had over the years. And Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of college. So that means I should do the same thing and start really young. It's like, well, those are the anomalies, right? Like most people, it's good to go out and get experience. It's good to go out and work in a corporate team environment and understand how challenging it can be with different personalities and working dynamics, and you know all the things that I learned working at multiple companies, which I think then in turn helped me build a great company culture, because I was like, I know what good looks like, I know what bad looks like, and I could model what we do around a good culture. So it's good to take risks when you're young, but I also think, take that opportunity to go, if there's a specific industry that you may want to start a business in, fashion, technology, go work for a company like that and learn the ins and outs of what it's like to run a company. Try to get as much exposure as possible, learn as much as possible, so that when you're showing up to do your own thing, you have some experience under your belt.
For sure. I think that's a good lengthy answer about how just because Mark Zuckerberg could become a billionaire, well, almost a trillionaire at this point,
Right.
that not everybody can do it. Because there is that notion of Elon Musk had to drop out of college, or even people have come on my show. Grant Cardone has very
Right.
specific opinions about that. And that you really have to think of how it works for everybody and where you're at in life too. Because luck does play a factor, which is something I just want to touch on real quickly.
Well,
How big of a
luck and
factor
I
do you
mean,
think
and
luck plays?
intelligence as well. I mean, there's some people that are just brilliant. I mean, I think like Musk, Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, like these guys are, that'd be like saying, oh, well, if I just like work really hard, I can play basketball like Michael Jordan. It's like, no, like some people are just born with an innate ability and talent that no matter how hard you work, no matter how smart you think you are, some people are just, naturally gifted. Um, so some of us have to like work a little harder to get there. So how much do I think luck plays into it? There's always a component of luck, right? Timing, market timing, what's going on in the world. If you just started a business and then you found out that the whole world was shutting down for COVID and you were in a retail business, like that's pretty bad luck, right? In our case, we were running a direct to consumer, comfort at home apparel brand heading into COVID. We crushed it, but that's luck. Like that was out of our control. Now, where I think, the idea of luck and where entrepreneurs, I think, are good at using luck to their advantage is identifying when you have a moment of luck or when you have a moment of favor, capitalizing on it, being ready to strike when you have that opportunity, um, and capitalizing on it. Like I said, that's a sign of a good entrepreneur. And some of that takes intuition, some of that takes grit. You got to take a little bit of risk sometimes to lean into something where you're like, I think this is an opportunity, and I'm going to go for it.
That's a very valid point there. So thank you for sharing it because I always like to ask anybody, especially yourself, because you've succeeded at a high level in business or athletes, has had luck and knowledge come together, and everyone always says it a little differently. So thanks for sharing that. And then, kind of the last thing I wanted to touch on is what would your closing advice be for young people to find passion? Because people ask me at times, they're like, Jacob, I see you interview some big people on your show. How do you do it? Like, I see you're not the biggest journalist in the world, like Joe Rogan. How do you do it? I said, I think passion and drive plays a factor.
Yeah.
I'm not the best. So, what would your advice be for people to find their passion?
You know, you've got to try a lot of things. And, I think particularly when it comes to career or profession or trying to think about, you know, uh, what you're going to get out of bed for in the morning, I think a lot of people, myself included, when I graduated, I was like, I want to just make as much money as possible. I want to take the highest paying job, with, yeah, obviously something that I'm probably pretty good at, but like, I didn't really care what the company was, what the product was, what the industry was. I was just like, I'm a good salesperson. I'm going to go sell stuff that makes me the most amount of money. And I did it, and I made a bunch of money the first couple of years that I worked, and I hated it. I like hated the product. I wasn't passionate about selling technology services, to big Fortune 500 companies. I was good at it, and I made a bunch of money, but like at the end of the day, it's not where I found passion and drive. Fast forward, the first year of Bombas, I didn't make any money. I literally made a $0 salary. The second year, I made $42,000. I was 31 years old. Third year, I made $75,000. So I was in my early 30s making $75,000 a year. It's less than I made when I came out of college. But I woke up every day so excited to go to work. I was so pumped. And that feeling is irreplaceable. And so, whatever you do, like, make sure you love it. Like, you can, the money part will follow later. And honestly, if you're fulfilled and you're happy and you can get out of bed every day with a smile on your face, excited to go and do whatever it is that you do, I guarantee you care less about how much money you make. Um, because that feeling is priceless.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that because at this age, what do you think every kid is thinking in college? I'm this
Yeah,
major.
you're
I'm not this
broke.
engineer. Oh, they're
Yeah,
thinking, what they're thinking, my aerospace friends that is going to be doing 102,000 because I'm at Purdue. My biomedical friend's going to be doing 88,000 for engineering. The electrical engineer's 95 grand coming out. That's what everyone literally talks about
yeah.
when they're stressing about studying. So thanks for sharing that with me.
Just do what you love, man. I know it sounds so cliche, and it's like
It,
it sounds like, advice from like your boomer parents or, grandparents or whatever, but like if you find the thing that you love and you're able to do that every day, I guarantee you, whether you make 90,000, 150,000, 400,000, you spend so much of your time working that if you can spend that time feeling joy and fulfilled and, like you have a purpose, the rest doesn't matter.
That's a good point. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the Jacob Buer show today. Is there any other exciting things you want to briefly throw in there?
It's holiday season. Bombas makes great gifts. Look out for our Black Friday Cyber Monday sales. And yeah, and remember, every item that you purchase as a gift for someone else, you're also helping someone in the homeless community receive an item of clothing that they need. So you kind of get two gifts in one. And yeah, that's my only plug.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the Jacob Buer show. And if you're ever in Indiana, feel free to stop by Purdue University. And if I'm in New York City, I would love to meet up.
Let me know, man. I'll definitely take you up on that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jacob.